There is no music in the Watterson kitchen on the night Nicole stops her own life to look at it. The kids are screaming for food. Richard is somewhere off screen, failing to be useful. The dinner is burning. And in the middle of all of it, Nicole freezes the frame on her own existence and asks, in a voice that the show has never quite let her use before, what she would do differently if she could go back. The episode is The Choices. It is the 6th episode of Season 5 of The Amazing World of Gumball. It aired on Cartoon Network on October 13th, 2016, and the entire 11 minutes of it is built around a single question that the show, until that moment, had spent 5 seasons treating as a punchline. Did this woman make the right decision when she was a girl? Did her whole life get bent into the shape it is now because of one moment in one park where she stopped to help a boy who was stuck in a log? That is the question. And the show, to its credit, does not flinch from how heavy it actually is. Welcome to Cartoon. Get comfortable. This one is going to take a while because it is not really about the worst decisions in the amazing world of Gumball. It is about the fact that this show, more than almost any other animated comedy made in the last 15 years, was constantly built on top of decisions that did not work. Decisions made by characters who were too tired or too scared or too in love to think clearly. Decisions made by Cartoon Network executives who had to figure out what to do with a series whose creator had already announced he was leaving. Decisions made by Ben Bacalé himself, who wanted to end the show and then watch the show continue without him, and who is still, years after the original finale aired, waiting for a movie that keeps slipping out of release schedules. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show built on bad calls. The bad calls are what make it interesting. The bad calls are what give every episode its specific kind of friction. And the bad calls are what eventually, in 2019, left the show stranded on a cliffhanger that nobody who worked on the show seems to have actually wanted. So let us get into it. The first decision is the one nobody on the show ever gets to take back, which is Richard Watterson clicking a link. The episode is The Treasure. It is the 10th episode of Season 2. It aired on Cartoon Network on October 25th, 2012, having been bumped forward from its original October 30th premiere date when the network slotted it into a rerun window. The premise is a treasure hunt, framed as a parody of a treasure hunt, with the kids combing the attic and the chimney and the front lawn looking for whatever the family secret is. The actual reveal is much smaller and much sadder than the framing suggests. Around 12 years before the events of the episode, sometime after Gumball was born, Richard was alone on the family computer. An ad popped up. The ad promised an out-of-this-world investment opportunity that would secure the future of his children. Richard clicked yes before the page finished loading. The page, when it finished loading, revealed that the investment was for the Watterson children, many generations down the line, not his actual kids. The company was called Stellar Corporation. The thing he had bought was a star. By the time he tried to get the money back, the company had gone bankrupt. The savings were gone. The Wattersons were poor. They have been poor ever since. Think about what that actually means. Not the joke, the flat fact of it. A man, alone in his house, sees an ad. He does not read it carefully. He clicks the wrong button. And the consequence of that click is that his wife works a job she hates for the rest of her adult life. The consequence of that click is that his children grow up in a house where the cereal is generic and the blender is a fan taped to a bowl. The consequence of that click is that when his daughter is old enough to start asking why the family cannot afford things, he has to spend an entire episode hiding the truth from her. Because the truth is that he ruined them. There is a version of The Treasure that plays the reveal as a warm, family bonding moment. There is a montage where the kids forgive him. There is a scene where they all stand outside on the lawn and look up at the star together. And Aeneas explains how stars are visible even light years away. And Darwin relates this to love. And the family is, for a moment, genuinely happy. And then the star fizzles out. The light goes off, like a bulb dying. The Wattersons stand on the lawn and look at the empty patch of sky where the thing they bought used to be. And the episode ends. That is the show telling you something. Not about Richard, not about the specific bad decision, about the entire economic shape of the family. The reason the Wattersons are poor is not bad luck. It is not the system. It is one man in one moment who did not pay attention. And the show keeps coming back to that over and over for the rest of its run. Every episode where Nicole comes home exhausted from the Rainbow Factory. Every episode where the family fights over a piece of food. Every episode where Richard sleeps on the couch instead of working. All of it traces back to a single click that nobody asked him to make. The first worst decision in the amazing world of Gumball is not really a decision at all. It is a moment of inattention that a man will spend the rest of his life paying for, while pretending he is not paying for it. And the show, with the lightest possible touch, never lets you forget that it happened. The second worst decision is the one Nicole has to face down in the episode that opens this video. The choices is, on paper, a what-if episode. Nicole has had a terrible day. The kids will not stop screaming. Richard has set the dinner on fire. She finds herself drifting into a memory of how she met Richard in the first place. The two of them were around 12 years old. Nicole was on her way to a karate tournament that began at 2 in the afternoon. Her parents had drilled the importance of this tournament and of every other tournament and of every other extracurricular activity into her since she was small. The episode goes out of its way to show you, in flashback, that Nicole's parents were not warm people. Her mother, Mary, voiced by guest star Liza Ross, scolds her in the car about her straight A report card because Nicole received an F in the box marked gender. Nicole points out that the F stands for female. Her mother says, essentially, that being a girl is not an excuse. Her father, Daniel, has road rage so violent that he punches the steering wheel hard enough to launch the engine out of the front of the car. The car breaks down. Nicole has to run to the tournament. As she runs, her mother calls after her, and Nicole assumes her mother is about to say she loves her. Nicole says it back. Her mother corrects her. She was going to say, second place is first place for losers. Nicole runs through the park. She avoids running through wet cement that a young Gary is laying. She passes other kids and ignores them. She gets lost. And then she finds Richard, who is stuck in a tree log, the result of a poor attempt to observe squirrels. He asks for help. She helps him. They talk. He asks her why the tournament matters so much. She says she has to be successful so that people will like her. He tells her, blushing, that people already do like her. The clock strikes 2. The tournament has started without her. She is devastated. He gives her one of his nuts to cheer her up. She asks him, more or less, what she should do with her life. He suggests, more or less, that she should maybe start living it. And the show holds on the two of them, 12 years old, sitting in the park together while a piano piece plays. The episode then shows you the alternate timelines, the version where she does not stop. She runs straight through the wet cement, makes the tournament on time, wins first place, graduates, becomes rich, becomes a major elected official, ascends to the rank of futuristic overlord, depicted in front of a sculpture that looks unmistakably like the Ryugyong Hotel in Pyongyang, and is eventually overthrown in a post-apocalyptic future, her monument toppled. The version where she takes Banana Bob as a suitor, who wins her over with a song that just sings the word banana to the tune of other songs, and who eventually drives her insane by never stopping. The version where she marries Harold Wilson, the rich kid from Elmore Junior High. They live in a mansion. He criticizes her constantly. She gets endless plastic surgery trying to please him. The relationship ends, in her imagination, with the mansion on fire and Nicole being loaded into a police car, screaming about whether the sushi is hot enough. Each alternate timeline is funny. Each alternate timeline is also, when you look at it directly, a portrait of a woman who would have hated her own life in any direction except the one she actually took. And here is where the show does the thing that most animated comedies are not capable of doing. It does not let Nicole answer easily. There is a long stretch of the episode where she is sitting in her own flashback, frozen, trying to figure out whether she should regret the decision to stop and help Richard out of the log. The kids are still screaming. The dinner is still burning. And then the show cuts back to her actual life, in real time, with a husband who failed her and 3 kids who are exhausting her. Richard, who has been listening to her describe how worn out she is, gives her the closest thing he has to advice. He has run out of nuts. He hands her half of his last one. The same gesture, decades later, repeated by accident. The decision Nicole made, the worst decision of her life by every external measure, was to stop and help Richard out of the log. Every credential she ever could have had walked away from her in that moment. Every ounce of approval from her parents went with it. Every alternate version of herself that the episode can imagine is, in its own way, a successful person. And what the episode is telling you, very plainly, in a voice the show almost never uses, is that the decision was the right one. Not because it led to a perfect life. It did not. It led to this life. The kids screaming, the husband on fire, the job she hates, the savings gone, the house falling apart. But this life, the show is saying, is the one where she is loved, the one where she gets to laugh, the one she would not trade. That is not a small thing for a kid's show to do. That is not a small thing for any show to do. The Choices is one of the most quietly devastating 11-minute pieces of writing in the entire run of the series, because it dares to ask the question every parent eventually asks, which is whether the trade was worth it. And then it answers, yes, but barely, and only because of how she chooses to feel about it. The food fight at the end of the episode, where the family throws food at each other and laughs, is not the show telling you everything is fine. It is the show telling you that this is what Nicole has, and that she has made peace with it, and that the worst decision she ever made was also, somehow, the best one. The show does not comment on this. It does not add a moral. It just lets the family laugh and ends. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The third decision is the one Gumball makes, accidentally, with his face. The episode is The Shell. It is the 20th episode of Season 3. It is the 96th episode overall, and it aired in October 2014. The premise is small. Gumball and Penny are performing a school production of Beauty and the Beast. Gumball is the Beast. Penny is Belle. At the climax of the play, in front of the entire school, Penny improvises a kiss. She did not warn him. She just decides, in the middle of the performance, that the moment calls for it. Gumball, panicked, lunges for the kiss too quickly and headbutts her instead. The headbutt cracks her shell. There is a thin, lightning bolt-shaped fracture across her eye. She covers it. Something inside the shell glows. The audience laughs. The play moves on. That is the inciting decision. A boy, terrified of intimacy, panics and accidentally damages the girl he loves. And what makes the episode great is that the show treats the headbutt not as a failure, but as the beginning of a much larger argument about what hiding does to a person. Penny, it turns out, has spent her entire life inside that shell. Her family tradition demands it. Her father, Patrick Fitzgerald, voiced by Dan Russell, sees the shell as a kind of armor, a thing that keeps Penny safe and recognizable and proper. The shell is the thing that has decided her shape since before she could remember. Gumball, who has just damaged it, is now responsible for what comes out. And what comes out, when she finally lets the shell fall away, is something the show has been hiding from the audience for 3 full seasons. Penny is not a peanut. Penny is a shape-shifting creature whose body responds to her emotions, who can take on the form of a fairy, a wolf, a dragon, a minotaur, anything her self-image generates in the moment. The Studio Ghibli influence is direct and acknowledged. Ben Bacalé has talked about it. The dragon form carries clear echoes of Howl's Moving Castle and Spirited Away. The wolf form carries echoes of Princess Mononoke. But the decision the episode is really about is not Penny's, and it is not the headbutt. It is the choice Gumball has to make in the climax, when Penny, now out of her shell, is fleeing through Elmore convinced that what she really looks like is a monster. She has shifted into a minotaur, then a slimy pig creature, then a dragon. Pest control has been called on her. Her own father, encountering her in his car, makes things worse with a remark about her looking like a monster. Gumball, riding on top of Patrick's car, finally stands up to him for speaking without thinking, and tells him to pop the hood. The hood opens. Gumball is launched into the air. He lands near Penny, in the forest, where she has shifted into a wolf form, and it is in the forest, with no audience, no parents, no pest controller, just the two of them, that Gumball has to make the decision the entire episode has been building toward. He has to tell her, plainly, that she is not what she thinks she is. He has to tell her, out loud, that he loves her in this form, in any form, in the form she will become next. He has to put words to a thing he has spent 3 seasons running away from. And the worst decision Gumball could have made, in that moment, was the one most 12-year-old boys would actually make, which is to flinch, to stutter, to not say it. He almost flinches. The show lets you see him almost flinch. There is the awkward beat where Wolf Penny asks him, in a low, growling voice, whether he could really love this. And Gumball, instead of immediately saying yes, makes a joke. He tells her she kind of used to look like a big coconut with holes in it. The joke is the kind of self-protective deflection a kid uses when he cannot find the actual words. And then, after the joke, he finds the actual words. He tells her that what she looks like is not who she is. It is just how she feels. And then he kisses her. The wolf form shifts back into the glowing fairy form. The episode ends with the two of them as an officially confirmed couple, the first real status quo break the show had ever allowed itself. The shell is, In its bones, an episode about how the worst decision you can make as a young person in love is to wait, to pretend you do not feel it, to prioritize your own comfort over the other person's terror. Gumball almost makes that decision. He pulls back from it at the last possible second. And the show, by letting him almost fail and then succeed, is making a point about what courage actually looks like at 12 years old. It is not heroic. It is not pretty. It is just the thing where you say the words you should have said 5 minutes ago, before the other person had to ask twice. The fourth decision belongs to Cartoon Network and to Ben Bacalé, and it is the one that probably mattered most for the long-term shape of the show. On September 6th, 2016, the show's creator, Ben Bacalé, posted on his Twitter account that he would be leaving the show after the 6th season. The phrasing was specific. He was bringing Gumball, in his words, to its final episode at the end of season 6. A fan replied, asking whether the cancellation was the network's call or his, and Bacalé responded that it was his decision. Cartoon Network responded almost immediately, with a statement that thanked Bacalé for his contributions, noted that the show had won 28 international awards, including 6 BAFTAs, mentioned that more than 170 million viewers had tuned in worldwide in the previous quarter, and announced that the network had already greenlit another season and would continue producing the show. In other words, the creator was leaving, the show was not. Think about what that actually meant for the writer's room. The man who had built the show, who had developed the characters from rejected concepts left over from his earlier commercial work, who had directed the tone of every script and every voice cast and every animation choice for 6 full seasons, had told the world he was done. And the network had responded, more or less, by saying that they would just continue without him. The internal pressure that creates is hard to overstate. Every writer on the show now had to do their job, knowing that the architect of the building was already walking out the door, and that whatever came next would be judged either as a continuation of his vision or as a betrayal of it. There is no version of that situation that does not affect the work. What actually happened, in the end, was messier than either Bacalé or the network probably wanted. There was no 7th season under the original continuity. The 6th season finale, an episode called The Inquisition, aired on June 24th, 2019, and ended on a deliberate, unresolved cliffhanger that Bacalé has said publicly was not his choice. He has said that he intended to resolve it in a feature film. The film was officially announced on February 17th, 2021, under the working title The Amazing World of Gumball Movie. It was greenlit on September 21st, 2021, with the title The Amazing World of Gumball, the movie. And then, in August 2022, after the Discovery merger with Warner Brothers, the film's planned HBO Max release was canceled. The movie was put up for sale to other streaming services. As of summer 2024, Bacalé was telling the Annecy Animation Film Festival that the movie was not canceled, only that it had no release date. The decision to let the creator walk while continuing the show, the decision to end on a cliffhanger that the creator himself did not endorse. The decision to greenlight a film and then strand it inside a corporate merger. The decision to let years go by with the audience left hanging. All of these are production side choices that shaped how the show ended, how it is remembered, and what kind of legacy it gets to have. None of them are the kind of decisions that a single person made. All of them are the kind of decisions that a corporate machine makes by inertia, by hedging, by not quite committing to either ending the show or letting it actually finish. The result, for years, was a series whose final canonical episode under the original run was a deliberate non-ending. That is not a creative choice. That is what happens when nobody in the room has the authority to say, this is the last thing we are making, and we are going to make it count. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 5th decision is one that the show built an entire character around, which is the decision to let Rob become the villain. Rob is a strange figure in the amazing world of Gumball because he was not designed to be anything. He started as a background character in seasons 1 and 2, a blue cyclops, a face in the crowd at Elmore Junior High, the kind of generic filler character that animators put into wide shots so the school does not look empty. He was so forgettable, in fact, that the show built an entire running gag around Gumball never being able to remember his name. According to the Amazing World of Gumball Wikipedia entry, Rob was a background character from the first 2 seasons who became trapped in the void after becoming, in the show's own internal logic, irrelevant. The void, for the uninitiated, is the place in the Gumball universe where deleted characters and abandoned ideas go. It is canonically a kind of conceptual graveyard for things the show no longer needs. And what the writers did, somewhere in the transition between Season 2 and Season 3, was decide that the most interesting villain they could possibly create was not a new character, but an old one. A character whose entire grievance against the protagonist was that the protagonist was important and Rob was not. That is a decision that takes nerve. Most shows, when they need a recurring antagonist, invent one. They build a new character with a new design and a new backstory and a new voice. The Gumball writers instead took a piece of background filler and gave him a reason to want revenge that was, fundamentally, a complaint about the show itself. Rob hates Gumball because Gumball is the protagonist. Rob's existence has been shaped by the fact that Gumball gets to have stories and Rob does not. This becomes explicit in the Season 4 episode, The Disaster, where Rob is shown to be aware of his own fictional existence, aware that he is a character inside an animated television program, aware that he has been written this way on purpose. The villain of the amazing world of Gumball is, in the show's internal mythology, a character who is angry at the writers. That decision works beautifully for about a season and a half. It produces some of the show's strangest, sharpest material. And then, in the Inquisition, the decision to make Rob the cliffhanger reveal, to have him be the figure behind the live-action superintendent, became the central frustration that fans had with the finale. Even devoted Rob fans, the people who genuinely love the character, have written about how the reveal felt like the show pulling back from a much more interesting idea. The original premise of the Inquisition, before the Rob reveal, was that the new superintendent was a live-action human, attempting to convert the animated kids of Elmore into live-action humans themselves. That premise is, in its bones, exactly the kind of thing the amazing world of Gumball does best. The friction between animation styles, the metaphysical question of what it means for a hand-drawn cat to encounter a real person. And the show, in its final episode, set up that premise, raised the stakes, and then in the last minute revealed that the human was just Rob in disguise. A character we already knew, a grievance we had already heard, a nemesis whose entire arc was about being upset at being a nemesis. That decision, to use the cliffhanger reveal as a way of bringing back the established villain rather than committing to the new threat, was a bet that the show would get to come back and resolve it. The bet was not insane. There was talk of a film. There was a network that had announced more episodes. The bet was reasonable, given the information available at the time, and the bet failed. The film got stranded. The continuity got handed off eventually to a revival series with a new title, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, which premiered on Hulu in the United States on July 28, 2025, with international rollout on Cartoon Network and HBO Max beginning October 6, 2025. The original Inquisition cliffhanger, the one Bacalé has said publicly was not his choice, has now been hanging unresolved for the better part of 7 years. And the show that has been brought in to resolve it is technically a different show with a different title. The decision to end on Rob has become, by accident of corporate timing, the decision to end the original series on a beat that nobody on the creative side ever wanted to end on. The sixth decision is one that the writer's room kept making over and over, and it is the decision to put Richard in charge. Richard Watterson is, by any reasonable measurement, a catastrophic father. He sleeps for the majority of his waking hours. He cannot hold a job. The few times he tries to work, he causes property damage on a scale that would, in any realistic universe, generate criminal charges. He treats his children less like children and more like roommates whose presence he tolerates. And on the rare occasions when he does try to parent, the parenting almost always ends with someone hospitalized. The show is not subtle about this. The show points at it repeatedly as the central comedic engine of the entire family. And yet, episode after episode, season after season, the writers keep putting him in charge of things. Field trips, birthday parties, the household, the kids. They keep handing him responsibility he is not equipped to handle, and then watching what happens. And what happens is almost always a small, quiet disaster. The Deal is one of the cleanest examples. It is an episode from season 5. Nicole, after years of being passed over, finally gets named Employee of the Month at the Rainbow Factory. She comes home with a misspelled plaque and a 3% raise, and the kind of pride that only a person who has been overlooked for a decade can recognize. Richard, instead of celebrating her, becomes immediately, visibly, transparently jealous. He decides that his work around the house, the work he does not actually do, has been underappreciated. He goes on strike. He sits in the front yard with a banner and balloons that say "Happy Birthday," but which he claims are protest signs. And the episode then puts him in charge of the kids while Nicole goes to work the next day. And the house, predictably, becomes a war zone. Light switches stop working. Walls get covered in strange drawings. By the end of the episode, the kids are running in circles around a neighbor, and Richard is solving the situation by letting them fight each other to the point of exhaustion until they fall asleep on the ground. What makes the decision interesting from a writer's room perspective is that the show keeps doing it, knowing it does not work. The narrative pattern of putting Richard in charge is, by season 5, so well established that the audience is essentially in on the joke. We know the moment Nicole leaves the house that something will break. The show is no longer trying to surprise us with the catastrophe. The show is using the catastrophe as a kind of ritual, a weekly demonstration of what happens when the wrong adult is given the controls. And the question the show is implicitly asking, episode after episode, is why Nicole keeps doing it, why she keeps trusting him, why she keeps coming home, surveying the damage, sighing, and then, in the final scene, choosing to stay. The answer the show suggests is the same answer the choices already gave you. She loves him. She made the trade. She is not going to unmake it now. And so the worst decision in the Watterson household, the decision that produces 8 years of property damage and emotional chaos, is the recurring decision to keep believing that, this time, Richard might not break the house. He always breaks the house. Nicole knows this. She does it anyway. That is not weakness. The show is very clear that it is not weakness. Nicole, when she is angry, is the most physically dangerous character in Elmore. She has, across multiple episodes, casually destroyed buildings. The reason she keeps trusting Richard is not because she is incapable of taking control. It is because, somewhere underneath the chaos, she has decided that the version of Richard who is sometimes useful is worth the version of Richard who is mostly not. That is a worse decision, in terms of immediate household function, than almost any other adult in the show makes. It is also, the show keeps insisting, a kind of love that the alternate timeline version of Nicole never gets to have. The bad decision is the love. They are the same thing. And the show, episode after episode, refuses to separate them. The 7th decision is the one the writer's room made about Rachel. Rachel Wilson was a recurring character in the early seasons of The Amazing World of Gumball. She is Tobias's older sister. She is voiced by Jessica McDonald. In her main appearance, an episode called The Party from the show's first season, Rachel throws a party, refuses to let Tobias and his classmates attend, and is then blackmailed by her brother into letting them come anyway, on the condition that they bring dates. The party falls apart. None of Rachel's friends show up. She ends up sitting outside, alone, crying, and Darwin finds her there. He cleans up the house for her. She kisses him on the cheek as a thank you. The episode ends with Darwin in love, and Rachel, for the first time, looking at one of Tobias's younger friends as something other than a nuisance. That kiss could have meant something. It is, structurally, the kind of moment a show plants in season 1 and then pays off across the next 5 seasons. Darwin spends the next several years of the show in love with first one girl and then another, and the show keeps reaching for romantic content for him without quite knowing where to put it. Rachel was, on paper, the obvious answer. She was older. She was already established. She had a reason, in that one episode, to look at him the way a person looks at someone who has just done something kind for them when nobody else would. The show had built the emotional architecture for the relationship to continue. And then, almost immediately, the show stopped using her. Rachel was written out of The Amazing World of Gumball, beginning with season 2. The Wikipedia entry for the show's character list notes this explicitly. The fandom wiki for Rachel goes further, noting that her removal was a creative choice, attributing it to the fact that Ben Bacalé and some other members of the staff disliked her. There was a storyboard for a scene featuring her in a season 3 episode called The Hero, but the scene was cut from the final episode. The show, eventually, gave the audience an in-universe explanation for her absence. In a Darwin's yearbook segment built around the character Clayton, Tobias mentions, almost as a throwaway line, that Rachel went off to college. That is the entire send-off. A character who, in season 1, had been positioned as Darwin's first major love interest, gets her exit explained in a sentence by her brother in a spin-off miniseries years later. What is interesting about that decision is not just that the writers killed off a romantic arc. Animated shows do that all the time. What is interesting is what it cost them. Darwin is, Across the run of the series, the character the show has the hardest time finding stories for. He is too sweet to drive a plot through bad behavior. He is too dependent on Gumball to drive a plot through independence. The few times the show tries to give Darwin his own romantic life, he ends up paired with characters who barely know him, in episodes that often play more as comedy bits than as continuing relationships. There is a version of Gumball where Rachel stays around, where the kiss in the party becomes the seed of a recurring storyline, where Darwin has a girl he is genuinely trying to grow up fast enough to deserve. The show chose not to make that version. The decision was made on creative grounds. The grounds were, fundamentally, that the people in the room did not enjoy writing for her. That is a very specific kind of bad decision. Not malicious, not careless, just the small, quiet act of removing a tool from your toolbox because you do not personally enjoy using it, and then spending the rest of the show trying to solve problems that the tool was designed for. Every later attempt to give Darwin a love interest, every Carrie episode, every brief flirtation that goes nowhere is happening in the negative space where Rachel used to be. The decision to write her out is, in retrospect, one of the smallest, worst decisions in the show's history. It also might be the one with the longest shadow. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 8th decision is the one Gumball makes about Penny's laugh. The episode is The Pact. It is from season 6. It aired in 2018. The plot, on its surface, is a parody of Strangers on a Train, the Patricia Highsmith novel that Alfred Hitchcock turned into a film. Two men meet on a vehicle. Two men have things in their lives they want to fix. Two men make a deal to fix each other's things, because doing it themselves would be too painful. In Hitchcock's version, the things are spouses, and the fixing is murder. In Gumball's version, the things are girlfriends, and the fixing is honesty. Gumball thinks Penny's laugh has become annoying. He cannot bring himself to tell her. Principal Brown, voiced by Steve First, is sitting next to him on the bus. Brown thinks Miss Simeon's morning breath has become unbearable. He cannot bring himself to tell her either, so they make a pact. Gumball will tell Miss Simeon about the breath. Brown will tell Penny about the laugh. Each of them will deliver the bad news that the other is too cowardly to deliver to his own girlfriend. What makes this episode one of the show's worst decision case studies is that the entire plot is built around Gumball choosing, at every possible decision point, the most dishonest available option. The show does not let him off the hook for it. Penny is sitting on the same bus. Penny is laughing in the way that he is, in the same moment, criticizing. Penny has done nothing wrong except change a small thing about herself in a way that her boyfriend now finds unattractive. The honest version of the conversation, the version a slightly more mature character might have, is the one where Gumball pulls Penny aside and says, gently, that he has noticed her laugh has changed, and he is having a hard time with it. That is awkward. That is also, basically, what relationships require. Instead, Gumball outsources the conversation to a man whose job is to discipline children, and whose own marriage is, by the show's own depiction, a swamp of unspoken complaints and casual cruelty. The episode then escalates the way these episodes always escalate. Gumball goes to extraordinary, physically destructive lengths to fulfill his end of the bargain. Miss Simeon's breath in the episode is so toxic that classmates around her literally disintegrate. Banana Joe, Bobert, and Leslie are all reduced to dust by it. Gumball, trying to slingshot a mint into her mouth, gets caught in the breath himself and is reduced to a skeleton. The visual extremity is the show's way of underlining how disproportionate the lengths are to the actual stakes. This is what telling someone an awkward truth about their body looks like, the show is saying. This is what it costs when you cannot do the thing yourself. And then, when Gumball has held up his end, Principal Brown refuses to hold up his. He brushes off the deal. He decides he likes his marriage uncomfortable. He leaves Gumball stranded with the original problem he was trying to solve. The ending is a downer, and the show frames it as one. Gumball, in trying to expose Brown's betrayal over the school intercom, ends up exposing the entire pact instead. Penny and Miss Simeon both hear the whole thing. The episode ends with both girlfriends standing right beside their boyfriends, who are too busy ranting to notice they are there. The show holds on Gumball's face as he realizes what has just happened. There is no resolution scene. There is no apology. The final image is a kind of deserved silence, where the worst decision is not the laugh, and it is not the breath, and it is not the pact. The worst decision is the original one, the one that started the chain, which is choosing to talk about your girlfriend behind her back instead of to her face. The show, by ending on the silence, is making a point about what that costs you. You do not get to take it back. You do not get to claim you meant well. You get to sit there in the hallway with the people you love watching you, and you have to live with what they just heard. That is one of the most unflinching endings the show ever wrote, and the reason it works is because Gumball has earned every second of it. He had several opportunities throughout the episode to do the right thing. He chose the wrong thing every time. The show is not punishing him for being 12 and clumsy. It is punishing him for being 12 and dishonest. There is a difference, and the show, in its 6th season, knows the difference exactly. The 9th decision is the one Cartoon Network never let Bacalé finish. The Inquisition is the 44th and final episode of season 6. It is the 240th and final episode of the original run of the series. It was directed by Mick Graves. It aired on Cartoon Network on June 24th, 2019, having been released earlier on video on demand on May 31st, 2019. The episode opens with Principal Brown running through the halls of Elmore Junior High in a panic, warning the other teachers that the school superintendent is coming. The students assemble in the auditorium to listen to a speech from the new superintendent, who is, for the first time in the show's history, a fully live-action human being. He is played by the actor Garrick Hagan. His name, in a piece of deliberately unsubtle writing, is Superintendent Evil. He pronounces it Vul, the way a person might pronounce the name Neville, and he is not joking. His mission, he announces, is to eliminate the cartoonish elements of Elmore Junior High, to make the students normal, to purge what he calls cartoonish conduct. The episode then spends most of its runtime escalating that premise into the show's most direct and most existentially terrifying threat. Students start being transformed into live-action humans against their will. Terry's face is erased. Alan is given a body. The cast members are pulled, one at a time, out of the show's specific weirdness and forced into something flatter, smoother, more conventional. This is not a normal antagonist. This is an antagonist whose plan is to delete the very thing that makes the show what it is. The multimedia animation, the clashing styles, the Cloud Kid and the Ghost Girl, and the 8-bit spider, and the live-action backgrounds. Everything that made the amazing world of Gumball visually distinctive is being threatened by a man whose entire personality is the assertion that this stuff should not exist. Gumball and Darwin spend the second act of the episode reverting transformed students back to their cartoon forms, mostly through small acts of cartoonish absurdity. There is a great gag where Gumball, trying to kiss Penny back into her cartoon form, accidentally kisses a different blonde girl with pigtails. The girl turns out to be Sarah, the show's resident superfan. The kiss makes Sarah ecstatic enough that her transformation reverses. Penny, watching this happen behind him, transforms into her dragon form out of pure jealousy. The show is, in these moments, doing what it does best, which is using the threat of erasure as the engine for a celebration of the specific weirdness it is being asked to defend. Then comes the unmasking. The students corner Superintendent Evil. He runs from them. Banana Joe slips his peel under Evil's foot. Evil falls. His head, deformed by the impact, becomes visibly polygonal under the prosthetic mask. Gumball pulls the mask off. The face underneath is Rob. The villain who has been threatening the show's entire existence is the show's established villain in a costume. The show has, in its final episode, taken its single most ambitious threat and revealed it to be a misdirection. The real story is the Rob story. The Rob story is the one we already know. And then the episode does the thing it really wanted to do, which is the cliffhanger. After the unmasking, Rob tries to explain himself. He tells Gumball and the others that he was not trying to hurt them. He tells them, with rising desperation, that transformation was their only chance of escaping to a place he calls the other place when this world ends. He says he was trying to save them. The students do not listen. They knock him out. They leave him on the floor of the school. The school empties. Night falls. Rob wakes up alone. He says to nobody that he did all of this for a reason. The floor of the school beneath him begins to crumble. The void opens up under his feet. Rob clings to the edge for a moment. He loses his grip. He falls in. The screen freezes on his face mid-fall. The credits music plays in an unsettling rendition. the show ends. That is the entire conclusion of the amazing world of Gumball, as it stood from June 24th, 2019, until the revival series began, arriving in 2025. A villain falls into a void after being knocked out by the protagonists for trying to warn them about something the audience never gets to find out. A world ends, or begins to end, off-screen. A series finale that is not a finale, designed deliberately as a setup for something that, at the time of broadcast, did not yet have a guaranteed continuation. Bocale has said publicly that the cliffhanger was not his choice. He has said that it was meant to be resolved in a film. The film was announced on February 17th, 2021. It was greenlit on September 21st, 2021. Its planned HBO Max release was canceled in August 2022 after the Discovery merger with Warner Brothers. The movie was put up for sale to other streaming services. As of summer 2024, Bocale was telling the Annecy Animation Film Festival that the movie was not canceled, only undated. Years on, the cliffhanger is still a cliffhanger. The decision to end the original series this way is, by any reasonable measure, the worst single creative choice in the show's history. Not because the episode itself is bad. The episode is, in many ways, the show working at its full power. The premise is sharp. The metaphor is direct. The animation is doing the thing it was always doing better than any of its peers. The problem is the bet the episode made, which was the bet that the resolution would arrive within a reasonable amount of time. The bet was that Cartoon Network would give them the movie. The bet was that the merger would not happen. The bet was that when the movie eventually got greenlit, it would actually get released. None of those bets paid off. The audience that watched The Inquisition in June 2019 has now been waiting longer for the resolution than the entire original run of the second season took to air. And in the interim, the show has been handed off to a successor series with a different title, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, which premiered on Hulu in the United States on July 28th, 2025, with international rollout on Cartoon Network and HBO Max beginning October 6th, 2025. The successor is, technically, a continuation. It is also a new brand, a new pipeline, a new pitch. The ending of the original series, the actual ending, has not really arrived. The decision to end on Rob falling has become, by the slow accumulation of corporate inertia, the decision to leave the original series unfinished. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 10th decision belongs to Nicole again, and it is the one she keeps making about her parents. The choices: the episode that opened this video ends with Nicole at peace with her decision to stop and help Richard out of the log. But the show is not done with that decision. There is a follow-up episode, much later in Season 6, called The Parents. The Parents is the 16th episode of Season 6. It aired in 2018. In the episode, Nicole is grocery shopping for bargain food because the family is, as usual, low on money. She is fighting another shopper for the same tray of corned beef. The shelf falls over. The other shopper turns out to be her father, Daniel Cinecourt. Her mother, Mary, is with him. Nicole has not seen her parents in roughly 20 years. The estrangement, established in the choices and confirmed here, began when she was a teenager, and they refused to accept her relationship with Richard. They did not attend her wedding. The reason given, played for a joke in The Parents, is that they did try to come, but they misread the wedding invitation. The episode is structured as a reconciliation. Gumball pushes Nicole to invite the grandparents back to the house. She agrees, reluctantly. The afternoon at the kitchen table is awkward, then hostile, then briefly violent. Plates are smashed. The couch is flipped. The Cinecourts get up to leave. Gumball performs a song designed to bring them back together. The bonding works. The reconciliation happens. The grandparents come back. Nicole and her mother and her father find their way to a kind of peace. And then, in the joke that critics of the episode have rightly pointed at, Gumball reveals to his siblings that the song was actually motivated by his desire to receive the Christmas presents the grandparents owe him as their unrecognized grandson. The reconciliation is real. The kid who facilitated it had ulterior motives. The episode, in classic Gumball fashion, undercuts its own emotional climax with the protagonist admitting he was working an angle. But the deeper decision the show is making, the harder one, is that Nicole is willing to forgive her parents at all, after 20 years of silence, after being abandoned at her own wedding, after being raised by people whose disapproval shaped the entire rest of her adult life. She lets them back in, and the show, in the closing moments of the episode, after the joke has landed, lets that decision matter matter. There is a quiet beat where Mary, in the car, looks at a picture on her phone of Gumball, Darwin, and Aeneas. There is a quiet beat where Daniel's keychain is shown to have a picture of a young Nicole on it. The grandparents have been carrying their daughter with them this entire time. The opening of the door in The Parents is the show telling you that some forgivenesses are not earned by the person being forgiven. Some forgivenesses are decisions the forgiver makes for themselves. That is one of the recurring patterns in the amazing world of Gumball when you watch enough of it in sequence. The bad decisions made by the adults in this show are almost always decisions about what to forgive. Richard's bad decisions are decisions about what work to avoid. Nicole's bad decisions are decisions about what hurt to absorb. The kids make decisions about what to want. The adults make decisions about what to let go of. The show, episode after episode, keeps coming back to the same quiet thesis, which is that the worst decision a parent can make in this kind of family is the decision to keep the door closed, and that the cost of opening it is sometimes the only thing that holds a family together. The 11th decision is the one Gumball makes in the final scene of the Inquisition, and the reason it matters is because the show holds on it. When the students corner Rob, when Gumball pulls the mask off, when Rob starts trying to explain himself, the show is setting up what should be, structurally, the moment of the series. This is the last episode. This is the last villain. This is the character the show has been building toward as its final antagonist for 3 full seasons. Rob has, in earlier episodes, been shown to know that he is a fictional character. Rob has, in earlier episodes, been shown to remember the void. Rob has, in earlier episodes, been the one figure in the entire town of Elmore who can see the strings holding everything up. And in his final scene, he is trying, for once, to tell the truth. He is trying to warn Gumball about something the show has spent years quietly pointing at. The world is ending. He has been trying to save them. Gumball does not listen. Nobody listens. The students knock Rob out. They leave him alone in the school. They go home. The decision the protagonists make in the final minutes of the final episode of the series is to refuse to hear the only character who knows what is actually happening. That is the worst decision, in pure narrative terms, that any character in the amazing world of Gumball ever makes. And the show is, on some level, aware of this. The framing of the scene, the way it lingers on Rob alone on the floor, the way it lets him say his final lines to nobody, the way it freezes on his face as he falls into the void, all of it is the show telling you that the protagonists got it wrong. They had a chance to listen. They did not take it. And now the world is ending. And the only person who tried to warn them is the one falling. That is a brutal note to end a children's comedy on. It is also, in a strange way, the most honest thing the amazing world of Gumball ever did. The show spent 6 seasons building a town full of characters who refused, individually and collectively, to take seriously the reality of their own situation. They are poor. They are stuck. The grown-ups are exhausted. The kids are growing up. The world they live in is, by the show's own metaphysics, fictional, contingent, capable of being erased at any moment by forces they cannot see. And the show, in its final scene, asks what happens when one of them finally figures it out and tries to tell the others. The answer is that they do not believe him. They knock him out. They go home. And the world ends anyway. That is the show telling you what it has been telling you all along. The worst decisions in the Watterson household, in the Fitzgerald household, in the Wilson household, in Elmore Junior High, in Stellar Corporation, in the writer's room, in the Cartoon Network executive offices, in the Discovery merger, all of them have one thing in common. They are decisions made by people who could not bring themselves to look directly at what was happening to them. Richard could not look at the page that had not finished loading. Nicole could not look at the version of herself her parents wanted. Gumball could not look at Penny and tell her his actual feelings. The writers could not look at Rachel and find a story for her. The network could not look at Bacalé and decide whether to let him finish. The merger could not look at the audience and decide whether the movie was worth releasing. And the protagonists in the final scene could not look at Rob and listen. That is the entire shape of the show in one final image. A character knowing the truth, trying to share it, getting hit on the head, and falling alone into the dark. The show froze on it. The show ended on it. And then the show kept not coming back. The 12th decision is one the show made about its own voice, and the show was honest about it. The amazing world of Gumball is, in part, a story about 2 kids growing up. Gumball Watterson and Darwin Watterson are 12 and 10 years old respectively, and they have stayed 12 and 10 years old for the entire run of the series. The voice actors who played them did not. Logan Grove voiced Gumball for the first 2 seasons. Kwesi Boki voiced Darwin for the first 2 seasons. By the end of season 2, both of them had hit puberty hard enough that the voices coming out of their mouths no longer matched the cats and goldfish on the screen. The show, instead of recasting quietly, decided to put the problem directly into the script. The 3rd season opens with an episode called The Kids, which is, on its face, an episode about Gumball and Darwin trying to make the most of their last bit of childhood before they grow up too fast. The voices in The Kids are Logan Grove and Kwesi Boki, straining audibly against the puberty their actors are going through. Both performers trying to push back into the higher register they used in season 1 and not quite getting there. The episode is, openly and on purpose, a goodbye performance. What the show then does, after letting Grove and Boki sing their last musical number, is reset itself. The universe rewinds. Gumball and Darwin keep being 12 and 10. In the next episode you hear from them, the voices are different. Jacob Hopkins is now Gumball. Terrell Ransom Jr. is now Darwin. Hopkins, born in 2002, was a fan of the show before he got the part, and prepared by lip-syncing along to old Logan Grove episodes until he could match the rhythm. Ransom Jr. came in younger, with a softer voice that was specifically chosen because it sounded closer to Season 1 Darwin than to Season 2 Darwin. The decision to recast was, by every available account, the right one. The decision to publicly announce the recast through the script of the show by writing an entire episode about how the original cast was aging out of the role was the worst one, because what the kids did on a meta level was teach the audience that the show was aware of itself in a way that most cartoons never let themselves be aware. From that point forward, every voice change, every continuity shift, every awkward production decision was something the audience could see the seams of. The fourth wall had a small crack in it now, and the show was the one that put the crack there. That decision compounded across the rest of the run. By the season 5 episode called The Copycats, Hopkins and Ransom Jr. had themselves hit puberty, and the show had to do another round of recasting. This time, instead of making it a whole episode plot, the show absorbed the change into the regular rhythm of an episode, and Nicholas Cantu took over Gumball, and Danielle T. Hansley Jr. took over Darwin. Most viewers noticed. Some viewers liked the new voices less than the previous voices. Some viewers stopped watching. The decision the show had made, all the way back in The Kids, to teach the audience to listen for the seams, came back as a slow tax on every subsequent recast. There was a version of The Amazing World of Gumball in which the voices changed quietly, and most people would have shrugged. There was a version in which the showrunners absorbed the cost of recasting without commentary. The show, in 2014, chose to make the cost visible. The audience has been listening for it ever since. The 13th decision is the one Richard makes when he answers a phone call. The job is from season 2. It aired in 2012. The premise, when you describe it flat, is absurd. Richard Watterson, calling a pizza place to order food, accidentally applies for a job. He shows up to work the next morning without realizing he has accepted employment. He puts on a delivery helmet. He gets on a small scooter. He drives off into Elmore with a stack of pizzas, and the universe begins to come apart. The decision the episode is built around is not really Richard's. Richard is incapable of making decisions of this kind. He does not know he is working. He does not know there is a problem. The decision that matters is the one Nicole has to make in the kitchen, watching the news, when she figures out what is happening. The news report shows the food and stuff store under a midnight sky in the middle of the day. It shows snow in a part of Elmore that has never had snow. It shows Marvin, one of the school staff, floating off the ground for no reason. Nicole connects the dots. The dots all lead to her husband's first job. She decides, in the moment, that the universe coming apart is a smaller problem than her husband being employed, and she sets off to get him fired before reality finishes degrading. What follows is a chase sequence in which Larry, the long-suffering Elmore everyman who had hired Richard in the first place, refuses to fire him on the grounds that, in Larry's words, tearing apart the fabric of the universe is not a dismissible offense. The Wattersons end up in Larry's car, racing Richard's scooter through Elmore, while Richard repeatedly hits the throttle and warps reality further with each acceleration. Nicole turns into a baby, then a puddle. Gumball loses a leg. Darwin's mouth turns black. The Wattersons keep transforming, and Larry transforms with them, and the city around them keeps glitching out until they catch up to Richard at the customer's door just as he is about to deliver the final pizza. The customer rejects the pizza because the center has a bite missing. Larry sees the bite. Larry fires Richard for eating the merchandise. The universe, in the same instant, snaps back to normal. That is the decision the writer's room is making in The Job, and it is one of the most elegant decisions the show ever makes. They are saying very clearly that the entire economic configuration of the Watterson family is structural. The reason Richard cannot work is not that he is lazy. It is not that he is incompetent. It is that the universe of the show is built around him not working. The universe needs Richard unemployed in order to function. The moment he gets a job, the world starts coming apart. This is, on one level, the worst possible thing the show could be saying about its own protagonist's father. Richard is not just a failure as a provider. He is a failure who, if he ever stopped being a failure, would destroy reality. On another level, it is the most generous reading of Richard the show has ever offered. He is not lazy. He is doing the work the universe needs him to do, which is to be unemployed. The Treasure showed you why the family is poor. The Job shows you why they have to stay poor. The two episodes, taken together, are the show's complete economic theology of the Watterson family. There is no escape. There is only a star that fizzles out and a husband who cannot be allowed to deliver pizza. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 14th decision is the one Gumball tries to make for the entire family. The Money is the 39th episode of Season 3. It is the 116th episode overall. It aired in the United States on July 9th, 2015. The fandom wiki notes that this was Ben Bakalay's favorite episode of Season 3. The premise, again, when you describe it flat, is the kind of thing the show would only attempt at the height of its powers. The Wattersons, in the cold open, are at the Joyful Burger ordering food. Nicole's credit card is declined. The family discovers they have no money left. Anais blames Richard. Richard explains, in a tone of pride, that he has been doing what business sharks do and depositing the family's funds in an offshore bank account, by which he means he has been throwing the money into the sea after converting it into gold. Nicole turns into a giant green muscular Hulk creature out of pure rage. The family is broke again. They are sitting in the booth, crying. Larry, on the other side of the counter, has an offer. Joyful Burger wants the Wattersons to do a commercial. Larry presents them with a contract. He explains, kindly, that the family is the ideal Joyful Burger family. Not too attractive, not too intelligent, totally dysfunctional. He says they will get paid. Gumball, alone among the Wattersons, refuses. He tears up the contract. He gives a speech about not wanting to be reduced to cliches for a quick corporate buck. He uses the word integrity. He walks out. That is the decision the episode is built around. A 12-year-old cat, faced with a chance to get his family out of poverty by doing a single fast food commercial, decides that artistic integrity matters more than the rent. The rest of his family wants to do the commercial. They tell him so, in a sequence where each of them attempts to demonstrate, in increasingly transparent ways, that product placement can be done with subtlety. Darwin holds up a Joyful Burger drink and winks at the camera. Anais hops in front of a Joyful Burger poster. Richard appears in full Joyful Burger merch with a Joyful Burger sticker over his mouth. Gumball is unmoved. And then, the world starts to glitch, because the show is making a meta-joke about its own production budget. The conceit, made explicit by the wiki and by every recap of the episode, is that the Wattersons have no money in universe, and the show has no money out of universe. The two budgets are, in this episode, the same budget. The longer the family refuses to do the Joyful Burger commercial, the less the show can afford to animate them. Their colors drain out. Their motion animation degrades. They turn into sketch stills. They turn into raw storyboards. By the time they get to the mall to find Larry and sign the contract, they have been reduced to sticky notes pasted onto a bare background. The world is collapsing because the family will not sell out. And the family, at the very last moment, with Gumball still holding out, signs the contract. The animation snaps back to normal. The episode ends with a Joyful Burger commercial featuring the Wattersons in 80s fashion, beatboxing, fake laughing on cue. What the episode is doing, on the level the show was always doing things, is putting two questions in your hands at the same time and refusing to answer either. Was Gumball right to refuse the deal? He was right by every standard of artistic integrity. He was wrong by every standard of his family not being homeless. Was selling out the worst decision of the episode or the best one? The show, characteristically, lets you choose. The Wattersons are still poor at the end of the episode. The joyful burger commercial does not appear to have changed their long-term financial situation. The animation budget restoration is the only real consequence we see. The family ate themselves whole into the joke and came out the other side basically the same as they started. The decision was bad. The decision was necessary. The decision was both. The money, at its core, is the show telling you that the worst decision you can make as a poor family is the decision to keep your principles when your principles are starving you, and that the cost of giving them up is the only thing that lets you keep being who you are at all. The 15th decision belongs to a 4-year-old Darwin, and it is the only decision in the show that ever gets to be unambiguously a good one. The Origins is a two-parter. It is the 20th and 21st episodes of Season 4. It is the first episode of the series that ran the full half-hour format. The first half tells the story from Nicole's point of view. A 4-year-old Gumball is destroying the house at a rate that is genuinely beyond the parents' ability to contain. He catapults oranges. He puts things in the washing machine. He brings sand and snow into the house at the same time. Richard is in the bathtub in grape soda. Nicole, exhausted past the point of speech, decides that the only way to manage Gumball is to give him a pet. She brings home a goldfish. Gumball names it Darwin. The fish dies overnight. Richard buys another. That fish dies too. Then another. Then another. The first half of the episode is a comedic montage of Watterson family pet death, set to the gospel song Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, with Richard flushing each successive Darwin down the toilet and walking back to the pet store to buy another one. The cycle ends when Richard, on his way home from the pet store, after Larry tells him there are no more goldfish, runs into a man with a van. The man with the van is the awesome store, the same store from which Richard will, years later, buy the evil turtle, and from which Rob will, years after that, buy the universal remote. The man tells Richard that this fish is special. Richard pays $100. He brings the fish home. He gives it to Gumball. The fish, this time, is intelligent. It can mimic facial expressions. It can understand what Gumball says. The two of them, Gumball and the new Darwin, reach their hands out across the kitchen table and form what the show calls, with no irony, a strong bond. The second half of the episode is told from Darwin's point of view. Through a series of misadventures, Darwin gets accidentally flushed down the toilet during a family photo. He ends up in the ocean. He meets other fish. He decides he wants to go home. The other fish tell him that fish cannot survive on land. Darwin, refusing to accept this, swims to the surface, jumps out of the water, and collapses on the sand. He has no lungs. He has no legs. Back at the Watterson house, Gumball is crying because his fish is gone. Gumball tells his parents that he believes Darwin will come back. And in the same moment, on the beach, Darwin grows a new heart and a set of lungs. He stands up. He has feet. He runs. He runs all the way back to Elmore. He gets caught by a pest controller and locked in a cage with a bunch of dogs. He escapes. He finds Gumball at the mall, just as Gumball is about to buy a replacement fish. Gumball gives Darwin his green shoes because Darwin's feet are bruised from running. The Wattersons adopt Darwin officially. The decision Darwin made, the decision to grow lungs and legs out of love, is the only decision in the show that the episode lets be exactly what it appears to be. There is no irony underneath it. There is no joke that undercuts the moment. There is no comedic reversal. A fish decided, in defiance of biology, to become a creature that could exist next to the boy he loved. The show treats this as a miracle and does not flinch. And the entire run of the amazing world of Gumball, every other decision, every other catastrophe, every other slow disaster, is built on top of that one decision. Darwin is in every episode of the show because of a choice he made when he was 2 years old, in the ocean, alone, with no lungs. Every time the show puts him next to Gumball, every time the two of them are on screen together, the show is asking you to remember that he chose this. The reason there is a brother in the family is because a fish refused to accept the natural laws of his own body. That is a decision the show keeps in the background of every episode. It is also, in some quiet way, the decision the show is most proud of having written. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 16th decision is the one Gumball and Darwin make in a basement, and it is, structurally, The moment the show committed to its own ending 6 years before, it knew how that ending would go. The Nobody is the 36th episode of Season 3. It is the 112th episode overall. It aired in 2015. The premise, on the surface, is a small mystery. Things are going missing in the Watterson house. $20 from Nicole's purse, Richard's toothbrush, Anais's Daisy the donkey doll. The family blames Gumball and Darwin. Gumball and Darwin, denying any involvement, decide to investigate. They discover a hidden basement they did not know they had. They discover, in the basement, a stranger who has been living there for some time. The stranger runs. They chase him. They corner him. And then, instead of calling the police, instead of calling their parents, instead of doing any of the things a normal child would do upon discovering an adult intruder in his house, Gumball and Darwin sit the stranger down and try to help him. The stranger has amnesia. He says he is a nobody. He says he has no mother, no siblings, no purpose, no place in the world. Gumball and Darwin, with the kind of relentless optimism that the show loves to give its protagonists, decide that what this stranger needs is a new identity. They suggest professions. They suggest hobbies. They go through the available roles in Elmore one by one. Every positive role, they conclude, is taken. The town has enough heroes. The town has enough good guys. The only role available, the only narrative position the town has not filled, is the role of the bad guy. They suggest, brightly, that the stranger could be the bad guy. They suggest, even more brightly, that he could be their bad guy, their personal nemesis, their mortal enemy, the worst guy the world has ever made. That suggestion, those words, that single conversational pivot is what triggers the stranger's memory. He remembers, in a flashback, that he used to be a background character at Elmore Junior High. He remembers that he was sent to the Void as one of the world's mistakes. He remembers that he saw Gumball and Darwin in the Void when they were there to rescue Molly, and that he tried to call out to them, and that they did not hear him. He remembers that he escaped by clinging to the back of Mr. Small's van as it returned to Elmore, and that he was disfigured by the journey. He remembers that his name is Rob, and the decision Gumball and Darwin then make, the decision that sets the entire rest of the show in motion, is the decision to walk away from Rob's vow of vengeance, as if it were a job offer they had successfully helped him land. Rob, with his memory restored, swears that he will be Gumball's worst nightmare. He swears that he will destroy everything Gumball cares about. He swears that he will take away everyone Gumball loves. He swears he will be Gumball's nemesis. And Gumball, in response, says, essentially, glad we could help. The episode ends with Gumball and Darwin walking away from Rob, content, having helped a stranger find his direction in life. Rob is left alone, watching them walk away, with the new identity they have just handed him. That is, in pure narrative terms, the worst decision the protagonists of the amazing world of Gumball ever make. They have just personally invented their own villain. They have just convinced a confused, traumatized stranger with no memory and no sense of self that the only meaningful role left for him in the world is to dedicate his life to destroying theirs. They have, in a single conversation, taken a person who said he was a nobody and given him the script for becoming a somebody whose only function is to hurt them. And they walk away from this conversation feeling good about themselves. They walk away, in fact, congratulating each other on a job well done. The show holds on the moment for exactly long enough that you understand what just happened. And then it cuts to credits. Everything that goes wrong with Rob from that point forward, every trap he sets, every plan he hatches, every attempt he makes to ruin Gumball's life. Every ride on a hijacked bus, every flooded dam that turns out to be a vending machine, every single universal remote, every moment where he tries to delete Gumball's family, every fall into the void, all of it traces back to a single conversation in a basement where two 12-year-old boys decided that the kindest thing they could do for a confused stranger was to give him a reason to hate them. Rob's entire arc as a villain is, in its origin, Gumball and Darwin's good intentions. They wanted to help. They helped him into a costume. The costume became the man. The man became the void. The void became the cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger became the ending. The 17th decision is the one Rob makes in season 4 with a piece of plastic. The Disaster is the 40th and final episode of Season 4. It is the 156th episode overall. It aired in September 2016. By this point in the show, Rob has spent 2.5 seasons as the show's recurring nemesis, has developed an alter ego called Dr. Wrecker, has been hijacked by Gumball and Darwin into being more interesting than he wanted to be, has been given an outfit and a deeper voice, has been arrested at the end of an episode called The Bus after his own bomb exploded on him, and has, at the start of the Disaster, walked into a place called the Awesome Store to buy something. The store is, again, the same van where Richard bought the evil turtle and where Richard later bought the second Darwin. The man in the van warns Rob that the item he is about to purchase has powers only a fool would not fear. Rob asks how much. The man tells him $12.99. Rob says he will use it for TVs. He will use it for DVD players. He will use it, he adds, for vengeance. The item is a universal remote. The remote is universal in the strongest possible sense of the word. It controls the actual universe of the show. It can pause time. It can rewind characters' ages. It can change the language spoken on screen. It can adjust the brightness and contrast of the world. It can change the background music mid-conversation from suspenseful to jazzy. It can turn off the parental filter on the show, which causes Gumball's parents to immediately tear into each other so harshly that they break up within minutes. It can mute people. It can change channels. It can, with a single button, open a portal directly to the void. Rob, after a brief moment of testing the remote on small things like an ATM and a sprinkler and the position of the sun, decides to rewind. The remote rewinds him through the episode's title card, through the show's intro, through a Cartoon Network bumper, and finally, through the events of The Nobody, where he sees, from outside, the moment in which Gumball and Darwin walked away from him in the void. The flashback gives him his motivation. He returns to the present. He swears revenge. He uses the remote to systematically dismantle Gumball's life. He sends subtitles in front of Gumball that Darwin reads as Gumball's actual thoughts, including a subtitle that calls Darwin a glorified pet and says the family would have more money if they had not adopted him. Darwin runs away. Rob breaks up Gumball's parents. Rob accidentally causes a kiss between Gumball and a girl who turns out to be Sarah. And then, in the climax of the episode, Rob throws the remote into the void, knowing Gumball will jump in after it to save his family. Gumball jumps. The portal closes behind him. The credits begin to play on the other side. The screen freezes on Gumball falling. The decision Rob makes in The Disaster, the decision to throw the remote into the void rather than just use it to delete Gumball directly, is the kind of decision a villain makes when he wants to be the kind of villain who has cleverness as well as power. It is also, in retrospect, the decision that begins the show's slow march toward its actual ending, because Gumball escapes the void in the rerun, the Season 5 premiere, and the entire arc of Rob from that point forward is shaped by the fact that he had a chance to win and chose, instead, to be theatrical. The Inquisition, 3 years later, will be Rob trying to be theatrical one more time, with a costume and a mask and a fake name, and it will end the same way. The show's villain is, fundamentally, a character who keeps choosing the dramatic option over the effective one. He is a person who wants the universe to recognize him as a villain more than he wants to actually defeat the protagonist. And every time he makes that choice, every time he picks the bigger gesture over the smaller win, the show is telling you something about why he is the villain in the first place. He was given the role by 2 kids in a basement. He has been trying to live up to it ever since. And the worst decisions he makes are the decisions where he reaches, again and again, for a version of villainy that the show has never actually let him achieve. The 18th decision is the one Alan keeps making about happiness. The Vision is the 4th episode of Season 5. It aired in 2016. The premise, when you describe it flat, is one of the most unsettling things the show ever wrote. Alan Keene is, by every previous appearance, the nicest character at Elmore Junior High. He is a balloon. He is filled with helium. He talks in a high, gentle voice. He is the boyfriend of a girl named Carmen, and his entire personality, across the run of the show before the Vision, is that he is incapable of being anything but kind. The show has often used him as the contrast figure for Gumball, the person against whom Gumball's casual self-absorption looks worse. Alan is the show's resident ambient saint. In the Vision, Gumball and Darwin accidentally pick up Alan's gym bag at school. The bag contains a USB drive. The USB drive contains a single document. The document is titled My Vision, and its subtitle, which Gumball reads aloud, is a manifesto on how Alan will gain the power he needs to purge Elmore Junior High of its greatest problem. Gumball and Darwin open the document. The episode then becomes Alan's narration of his own plan as he steps through it on screen. He is going to alter his appearance to look more like a leader. He is going to lower his voice. He is going to add a slight southern accent for approachability. He is going to manipulate other students into nominating him for school president in such a way that they think the nomination was their own idea. He is going to launch slander campaigns against his opponents. He is going to invent a fake grade tax to provoke a riot, and then position himself as the candidate of stability. He is going to win the election. And once he has the presidency of the school, he is going to institute what he calls happy camps, facilities where unhappy people will be confined and forcibly exposed to joyful thoughts under round-the-clock surveillance until they are corrected. And his vision, he announces, is to have a happy camp in every town, state, and country across the world. Gumball and Darwin, having read the entire manifesto, sit in their bedroom in shock. Gumball declares that if the road to oblivion is paved with good intentions, Alan is about to build a freeway on it. Gumball and Darwin then decide, with the kind of straightforward moral logic that 12-year-olds occasionally arrive at, that they need to assassinate Alan before he becomes the worst dictator the world has ever seen. The rest of the episode is a series of failed attempts on Alan's life, most of which fail because Gumball and Darwin keep forgetting that Alan is a balloon and is therefore difficult to harm in conventional ways. The episode ends with what looks like a relief. The whole thing was a misunderstanding. Alan was just writing a school project. The happy camps were not real. Gumball and Darwin apologize for trying to kill him. They laugh nervously. They walk out of the room, and the camera holds on Alan, alone, after they have left. He stops laughing. He turns to a library computer. He opens a document. He starts typing. The new document is titled, in his now Southern villain voice, A Manifesto on How to Forcibly Seize Power and Eradicate Sadness Across the Globe. Alan has, in the moment Gumball and Darwin walked out of the room, decided that their suspicion of him was actually a really good idea. Gumball walks back in, having heard him, and pops Alan with a pin. The decision Alan makes, in those final seconds, to go ahead and become the dictator that Gumball and Darwin had wrongly accused him of being, is the show's tightest example of its core thesis about good intentions. Alan's original vision was, by his own internal logic, kind. He wanted to remove sadness from the world. The mechanisms he was designing for the removal of sadness, the cameras and the camps and the corrections, were monstrous. But Alan had never quite assembled them in his head as monstrous, because his self-image as the kindest person in Elmore prevented him from seeing what he was actually planning. It took Gumball and Darwin reading his plan back to him with horror for Alan to realize how good the plan actually was. The worst decision in the vision is not Alan's dictatorial planning. It is Gumball and Darwin's decision to read the document out loud in his presence. Their attempt to stop him is the thing that gives him the idea. The show, in its final beat, is making the same point it keeps making. Good intentions, applied to the wrong person at the wrong time, become the script for the worst possible outcome. Gumball and Darwin gave Rob a villain identity in a basement. They gave Alan one in a library. They keep doing this. They will keep doing it for the rest of the run. Before we move on, if you are enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The 19th decision is the one the writer's room made when they decided to give the Wattersons a bill for everything they had ever broken. The finale, which is, despite its title, the Season 2 finale rather than the series finale, is the 40th episode of Season 2. It aired on Cartoon Network on December 3rd, 2013. The premise is, structurally, a reckoning. 2 seasons of cartoon physics, 2 seasons of property damage, 2 seasons of the Watterson family causing chaos and walking away from it without consequences. All come due at once. Mrs. Jotunheim arrives at the Watterson house and informs them that, since 75% of Elmore was destroyed in the rampage her son Hector went on in the Colossus, the Wattersons are now responsible for paying for half of the damage. Principal Brown arrives and announces that Gumball and Darwin must return to kindergarten because they have not earned enough academic credit due to constant fights. The police call Richard about his unpaid fines for reckless driving, with footage from earlier episodes shown to remind him. Santa Claus is suing the family for running him over in the Christmas episode. Mr. Small is suing them for giving him claustrophobia. Gary the bus driver is suing them for the scooters they destroyed in The Watch. Lawrence Needlemeyer is suing them for ruining his marriage proposals across multiple episodes. The total bill comes to $800,000, due tomorrow, or they lose the house. Anais, the only Watterson capable of grasping causal logic, realizes immediately that all of these consequences are the simple, accumulated result of every reckless decision the family has ever made on screen. She tries to make a plan. The rest of the family ignores her and runs off to make things worse. Gumball, Darwin, and Richard hijack Gary's bus, crash it into the Fitzgerald's house, get into a staged fight with Patrick, scam a group of high-achieving students' parents, get arrested, and end up in a prison cell with the rest of the family. They escape by getting an inmate angry enough to punch their dad through the wall. Anais then proposes that the only way out is to make things even worse, fast enough that the chaos resolves itself by collapsing under its own weight. The family agrees. They go on a rampage. They send Mr. Small in an envelope to the smallest country in the world. They unleash the Watterson family's frozen tenant Kenneth, who eats a bus and grows giant. They insult Hector's mother to the point that Hector goes on another rampage. The two giant monsters fight each other in the streets. The Wattersons race away on stolen mobility scooters. They get back to their house to find an angry mob of every Elmore citizen they have ever wronged waiting to attack them. The episode ends with the Wattersons cornered in their own living room, the mob breaking down the door, Nicole declaring that this is the end of the family, and Gumball saying that the only thing that can save them now is reality being completely reset by some kind of magic device. The credits roll. The episode ends without showing the resolution. The next time the show comes back, in season 3, everything is fine. There is no follow-up. There is no in-universe explanation. The reset, the magic device Gumball wished for, simply happens off-screen, between seasons. The decision the writers made, with the finale, was to take every consequence the show had been refusing to acknowledge for 2 full seasons, and let them all arrive at the door at the same time. And then, having arrived, the consequences are erased. The family does not actually owe the $800,000 in season 3. The Hector damage does not actually catch up with them. The lawsuits do not actually proceed. Everything the finale set up gets quietly thrown away the moment the next season begins. And the show, in doing this, is making a very specific statement about the kind of show it intends to be from then on. The consequences exist. The consequences are real. The consequences will, occasionally, be allowed to surface. And then, the consequences will be erased. Because if they were not erased, the show could not continue. The finale is the show telling you that it knows how much it has been letting the Wattersons get away with, and that the only reason the Wattersons get away with it is because the show is the kind of show that allows them to. The reset button is, quietly, the show's most honest piece of writing about its own format. That decision to acknowledge the consequences and then immediately erase them is the decision the Inquisition will, 6 years later, refuse to make. The Inquisition is, on a structural level, the finale without the reset. The cliffhanger does not get erased. The void does not close. The next season, if you accept the revival series as the next season, arrives years late and under a different brand. Whatever the finale was, the show could afford to do, because it knew it had a season 3 coming. Whatever the Inquisition was, the show could not afford to do, because nobody knew when the episode aired what was actually coming next. The finale is the show writing a check it could cover. The Inquisition is the show writing a check it had to leave on the counter, hoping someone would eventually pay it. The 20th decision is one the show made about how long an episode could be. The Amazing World of Gumball, in its first 3 seasons, was produced as a series of 22-minute episodes that consisted of 2 11-minute segments. The Wikipedia entry for the show notes this directly. In the United States, the 11-minute segments often aired separately on Cartoon Network's schedule, but the production unit was the half hour. Starting with season 4, the 11-minute segments were produced and aired individually worldwide. The half-hour format was abandoned. The show became, structurally, a set of disconnected 11-minute pieces. That is a production decision that does not look like much when you describe it. It is a scheduling change. It is a unit of work change. It is the kind of decision that appears in a Wikipedia footnote and never makes it into a recap. But its effects on the show, when you look at the second half of the run, are visible everywhere. The origins, the 2-parter, that introduces the awesome store and tells the story of how Darwin came to the family, is the show's first true half-hour episode under the new format, and it is structured deliberately as a two-parter rather than as a single 22-minute piece. The decision to make it a two-parter rather than a single uninterrupted episode means that even the show's most ambitious narrative work in season 4 is being packaged in 11-minute units. The disaster at the end of the same season is one episode setting up a cliffhanger. The rerun, the season 5 premiere, is the resolution. The two episodes are designed to be watched together, and they were, in many international markets, broadcast together. But they are formally separate units. They were produced separately. They were animated separately. They have separate credits. That decision, the move from 22-minute units to 11-minute units, is the production side mirror of the in-universe Wattersons cannot make money problem. It is a constraint that shapes what the show can and cannot do. A 22-minute episode can hold a complete arc. An 11-minute episode can hold a single scene, a single setup, a single beat. The decision to commit to the shorter format season after season made the longer arcs harder to assemble. It made the Rob storyline, which is fundamentally a multi-episode arc, depend on the audience watching the episodes in the right order. It made the Inquisition, the final episode, depend on the assumption that the next 11 minutes were coming. They were not coming. The next 11 minutes did not arrive for years, and when they arrived, they were under a different title. The format decision was not made in bad faith. There were good production reasons for it. 11-minute episodes are easier to schedule. They are easier to syndicate. They give the network more flexibility about how to pair episodes for individual broadcasts. The decision was reasonable on the terms in which it was made. But the consequences of that decision, the way it constrained what the show could do with its own continuing arcs, are visible in every season after season 3. The show's largest, most ambitious storylines kept being shaped by the 11-minute container that was holding them, and the largest, most ambitious storyline, the Rob arc, kept getting compressed into individual 11-minute setups and individual 11-minute resolutions, until the final setup, in the Inquisition, did not get a resolution at all. The 21st decision is the one nobody can quite locate, and it is the decision the show is, in all of its episodes, asking you to forgive. There is a recurring move in the amazing world of Gumball when the writers want to acknowledge that they have done something cruel to the characters, where the show pulls back and lets one of the Wattersons, usually Nicole, look directly at what just happened. The food fight at the end of The Choices is one of these moments. The lawn at the end of The Treasure is another. The walk away from Rob in the basement at the end of The Nobody is, in a darker register, also one of these moments. The show, having put the family through something that should permanently break them, gives the family a beat in which to absorb the damage and then choose, without comment, to keep going. That choice, the choice to keep going, is the decision the show keeps asking the Wattersons to make. And it is the same decision the show keeps making about itself. Cartoon Network kept making episodes after Bacalé announced he was leaving. The writer's room kept producing scripts after the recasts kept changing the voices. The show kept reaching for ambitious episodes after the format had been compressed into 11-minute units. The audience kept showing up after every cliffhanger that did not resolve. The corporate machine kept paying the bills after the original creator had moved on. Every level of the show, in-universe and out, has been doing the same thing the Wattersons do at the end of every episode, looking at the damage, choosing to keep going, throwing food at each other, and laughing. That is what the show was. That is what it is, even now, in its slow tale of revivals and restarts and canceled HBO Max releases and successor series under different titles. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about people who keep choosing each other in defiance of every reasonable economic, structural, and cosmic argument that they should not. Richard should not be allowed to deliver pizza. He delivers pizza, and the universe almost ends, and the family chooses him anyway. Nicole should have made the tournament. She did not, and her parents abandoned her, and she chose the husband who held her up. Gumball should have flinched in the forest. He did not. And Penny stayed out of her shell, and they became the show's first real couple. Darwin should have died in the ocean. He did not. And he grew lungs and legs out of love. And he is in every episode of the show because of it. Alan was a balloon who could have remained the kindest person in town. 2 kids handed him a manifesto for global tyranny by accident, and he kept the script. Rob was a background character with no purpose. Two kids told him that the only role left in the world for him was to be the worst guy ever made, and he believed them, and he became their nemesis, and he fell into a void. The 20-second decision is the one Gumball makes after he has already won. The rerun is the first episode of Season 5. It was originally going to be titled The Disaster Part 2, and the music in its title card is the audio from the Disaster's title card played in reverse. It is the direct continuation of the cliffhanger from the Season 4 finale. Gumball, having pressed rewind on the universal remote in the closing seconds of the previous episode, finds himself sent all the way back to the start of that disastrous day. He has the knowledge of everything that happened. He has the chance to fix it. He has the chance to prevent every bad thing Rob did before Rob does it. The episode is built around that chance and what Gumball does with it. What Gumball does with it, at first, is fail. He tries to warn Darwin about the subtitles. He scrambles the letters on the closed captioning so they do not say what Rob is going to make them say. Rob notices. Rob improvises. Rob hits the eject button on Darwin, and Gumball pushes his brother out of the way at the last second, and the button hits Banana Joe instead, and Banana Joe explodes. Gumball lunges for the remote. The two of them fight for it. The remote, in the struggle, hits the rewind button on Gumball's parents, and turns Nicole and Richard into babies. Anais, mid-explanation, watches her own arm shrink, then her hand, then she vanishes. Darwin, instead of vanishing, regresses to the size he was when Richard first bought him from the Awesome Store, and he suffocates because he no longer has lungs. Gumball's family is gone. Rob throws Gumball into the void, and then, in the basement of the show's 5th season, Gumball makes a decision that the show, until that moment, had not let any of its protagonists make. He follows Rob, not to fight him, not to win the remote back, to save him. Gumball, having been ejected into the void himself, finds Rob in the void and tells him plainly that he is not going to leave him there. Gumball, having watched Rob destroy his entire family, having every reason to walk away and let the void keep him, decides instead that the worst thing about Rob's life has always been the moment Gumball and Darwin walked away from him in the nobody, and that he is not going to do it twice. He chases Rob through the void. His own arms start to shrink because the timeline is collapsing. He throws the remote at Rob because his hands no longer work. Rob catches the remote. Rob has, in his hand, the only thing in the universe that can erase Gumball forever. He raises his finger to the power button, and then Rob, instead of erasing Gumball, presses rewind. Rob takes himself and Gumball back to the mall. Rob, having seen Gumball jump into the void to save him, accepts that maybe the protagonist of this show is not the person his backstory had told him he was. Rob explains to Gumball that he is going to fix everything by going back further, all the way to before the disaster aired, and undoing his own purchase of the remote. Gumball points out that if Rob does this, Gumball will not remember any of what just happened. Gumball will not remember that he and Rob became friends. Rob agrees that this is true. Rob says he will be okay being enemies again. Rob then rewinds himself back to the moment before the disaster and destroys the remote. Only the holder of the remote at the moment of the rewind retains memory of the timeline that has been erased. Rob, alone, remembers everything. Gumball, alive, with his family restored, remembers nothing. That decision, Gumball's decision to jump into the void after the villain who had just murdered his family, is the moral inverse of the decision the protagonist will make in the Inquisition 4 years later. In the rerun, Gumball listens to the worst possible thing about Rob. The thing where Rob tells him, in the void, that he belongs there with the rest of the universe's mistakes, and Gumball refuses to accept the framing. He saves Rob anyway. He saves him by following him into the place Rob keeps trying to drag everyone else into. In the Inquisition, given the same essential choice, the same villain, the same warning, Gumball does the opposite. He stops listening. He walks home. The world ends. The decision in the rerun is the show's highest, most generous version of who Gumball can be. The decision in the Inquisition is the show's lowest, most exhausted version of the same character. And the only person in the entire universe of the show who remembers both versions is Rob. Rob is the only one who knows that Gumball, on his best day, would have come for him. Rob is also the one who, in the final episode, gets left on the floor anyway and falls. That is the cruelty buried inside the rerun when you watch it again after the Inquisition. The show gave Rob, exactly once, the version of Gumball that would have saved him. It then erased that version from Gumball's own memory. And then, 4 years later, in the actual finale, it gave him the other version, the version that walks away. The void is the same void. The fall is the same fall. The only difference is whether Gumball is willing to follow him in. And the show, in its final scene, decided that Gumball would not be. The rerun is the version of the ending that the show wrote and then made unrememberable. The Inquisition is the version of the ending that the show wrote and then made permanent. Between those two episodes, between Gumball jumping after Rob and Gumball walking past him, is the whole moral weight of the worst decision in the amazing world of Gumball, and the show has been carrying it quietly in the negative space of its own continuity ever since. The show is built out of these decisions. Every one of them, taken on its own, looks like a mistake. Every one of them, taken in context, is the only reason the show works. The bad decisions are not the failure mode of the amazing world of Gumball. The bad decisions are the engine. They are the thing that makes the family worth watching. They are the thing that gives every episode its specific friction. They are the thing the writer's room kept choosing, episode after episode, season after season, because the alternative, the version of the show where everyone made smart decisions, would not be this show. It would be a different show, with a different family, in a different town, with no Wattersons in it. And the worst decisions, the absolute worst ones, the ones that produced the cliffhanger and the canceled movie and the corporate weather, are still the ones the show would have made, even if it had known how they would end. Because the show was always, on some level, about what happens when people who cannot stop themselves from making bad decisions are forced to live with the consequences. And the consequences, in the show, are usually love. That is the warm landing the Choices has been waiting for since the beginning of this video. Nicole in the kitchen after the food fight. Richard on the lawn after the star fizzles out. Gumball in the forest after Wolfpenny kisses him back. Darwin on the porch in green shoes. Alan alive, having been popped before he could finish the manifesto. The show kept giving its characters, again and again, a moment after the bad decision in which to look at what they had just done and decide to keep being a family anyway. Every one of those moments is the show telling you that the worst decisions in the amazing world of Gumball are not the ones the audience remembers as bad. They are the ones the audience remembers as the reasons we care about these people in the first place. And then, in the final scene of the original run, the show gave one of those moments to Rob instead. Alone, on the floor of an empty school, in the dark, after the Wattersons had gone home. Rob, having spent 6 seasons trying to find his place in a world that never wanted him, finally got the moment of looking at what he had done. He looked at it. He chose to keep going. He stood up. He spoke to no one. He said it had started. The floor opened under him. He fell. The show froze on it. The show ended on it. Rob got the moment the show had spent every other episode giving to the Wattersons. He got it alone, in the dark, with no one watching. And then the show stopped, and the years started, and the void stayed open, and the resolution did not come. And the resolution still has not come. And the resolution may not come for years yet. And the show is technically still ending, somewhere in installments, under a different brand, on a different streaming service, while the original ending, the actual ending, the one that froze on Rob's face in 2019, sits where it has always sat, unresolved, unfinished, waiting. The worst decisions in the amazing world of Gumball were never the ones the characters made. The characters were always, in the end, forgiven for everything. The worst decisions were the ones above their heads, the ones in offices they could not see, the ones that decided, on some afternoon in 2019, that the show would end on a cliffhanger because the resolution was coming, and then decided, on some afternoon in 2022, that the resolution was not actually coming after all. Those are the worst decisions. The Wattersons cannot be blamed for them. The writer's room cannot be blamed for them. Bacalé cannot be blamed for them. They are the kind of decisions that nobody actually makes, because they are made by the slow weather of a corporate merger and a streaming pivot in an industry that, in the year of the Inquisition, was already turning against the kind of show that the amazing world of Gumball had been for the previous 9 years. The show was always going to end. The show was supposed to end. The show wanted to end. Bacalé had said, as early as 2016, that he wanted the show to end. The audience knew, by the time the Inquisition aired, that they were watching something close to a finale. What nobody knew, what nobody could have known, was that the finale was going to last 7 years. That the freeze frame on Rob's face was going to become, by accident, the last image the original series would ever produce. That the worst decision the show would ever make was not made by anyone in particular. It just happened, slowly. In rooms the show was not allowed in. Nicole's food fight, in the kitchen, at the end of the choices, is what the show wanted its ending to look like. A family, exhausted, broke, surrounded by chaos, choosing each other anyway. The Wattersons throwing food at each other and laughing while the credits roll. That is the ending the show was built to deliver. That is the ending the show, on its best day, in its best episodes, in every quiet moment between Nicole and Richard, or between Gumball and Darwin, or between Penny and her shell, kept gesturing at. The bad decisions the show was telling you all add up to this. The bad decisions the show was telling you are the only reason this is even possible. And then the void opened, and Rob fell, and the Wattersons did not get the kitchen. They got nothing. They got a freeze frame. They got 6 years and counting of a finale that was supposed to be a setup. They got a successor series under a new title. They got, in the end, the one decision the show could not protect them from, which was the decision of the world outside the show to stop letting the show end on its own terms. That is the worst decision in the amazing world of Gumball. And it is the only one the show, for all its specific genius, for all its multimedia chaos, for all its sweetness and its cruelty and its quiet moments of grace, was never able to write its way out of. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next.